proper decision making. So that has been also mentioned on the first question, lesson learned and challenges. Also, the quality of the early warning systems was mentioned, is how much of the results of this early warning can impact the capacities to react according to the quality of the results that they can give. And the need also for joint surveillance and joint data analysis. I think I have been covering most of what was discussed. Jan, if you want to add anything on first question.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think maybe one other point that came up was, not forgetting advocacy and policy components. So it was interesting in our group because there were, some of these broad stroke strategies that we could think about, and then there were also some very, very specific ones, such as what Ludo mentioned there with livestock fodder stockpiling and things like that. So it was very good discussion and good points. Over.
Thanks, Jan. For the second question on what are the opportunities for the agricultural working group to engage in anticipatory action, I think the group highlighted the importance to place all initiatives within the country preparedness activity. So it's action. So it's really important to place, and especially that should be included into the HDP nexus as country level. Also, we had a great comment about creating 5W for agriculture and livestock. Most of the speakers were also discussing and requesting support from the agricultural working group in terms of development of tools for predictive models, linking with academic partners if possible, and then use these predictive models to build strong and useful scenarios in terms of how to be ready whenever a crisis is basically appearing and not waiting for the crisis to appear. So having the capacity to develop sound and scenarios. And I think that's all also for this one. I think that was the main messages, knowing that these will be discussed also and review in the next agriculture working group. But Jan or David, if you have anything to add.
No, again, you covered it very well, Ludo. I think with all of these, it was interesting to see that some of the opportunities are things that certain countries and partners have begun to pilot, and even maybe using old tools that are now being enhanced and improved for the current settings and this particular anticipatory action type of intervention. So it's all very good examples of things that we can actually achieve and do. I don't think anything was very pie in the sky. It's all stuff that we as a working group are going to be able to support and hopefully continue to roll out to all the different partners. Thank you.
And for the last, David, do you want to go through the third question? I know we were basically focusing on the question 1 and 2.
We can, if you see in the screen, I put also the inter-working group collaboration. If you like to go ahead. I think that question was more on the collaboration within our working group at a global level. So we have cash and market and programming quality that were in the parallel room while we were having discussion with agriculture working group. So on this one is how to link better with those groups, but also with other sectors. And here we think especially about wash and nutrition, and I think there was a strong also, let's say, engagement on the environmental impact that is part of our job as well within the food security and especially on agriculture. I don't know if you want to add a few things, Ludo or Jan, on this. Otherwise, we can close there.
No, I think that's fine. I mean, we didn't discuss this one as much in our group. We left the slide open for people to put comments. But I was hoping that maybe during the plenary, we would have some opportunity to discuss with the other working groups a little bit more on this slide specifically. Over.
Okay, we'll keep them for the end, I think, with the other working groups. So let me stop sharing now, and maybe we'll take the question at the end. I believe that Paul just mentioned that he has to go. So I'll take over on the facilitation of this breakout room. Thanks a lot, Paul. Correct me if I'm wrong, I still see you here.
Yes, but I will be leaving soon. So thank you for taking over, and thank you, Davide. It's appreciated.
Thanks to you. Thanks a lot for the facilitation and goodbye as a SAG member. We will miss you. So let's take over from Paul. So I will drive you for the second working group. I think is the cash and market. So if I don't know who is going to present on that, if it's Corey or Ruko.
It'll be myself.
Okay, great to see you, Ruko. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So from our side, we had two very interesting presentations. One was from Oxfam's Be Ready project in the Philippines, which specifically looked at conducting anticipatory action, an anticipatory action related project. And then the second piece was kind of reflections from CALP on what they're doing in the cash and voucher space in relation to specifically kind of focused on climate and the environment. And so there's several kind of new resources that they have. There's several work stream activities that they'll be undertaking, and also a community of practice. So maybe just to make others aware that CALP does have a kind of a specific working group that is focused on climate and the environment. And if folks would like to engage in that and get more information, the CALP network, we can provide that contact information. So following these two presentations on what partners we're doing, we really tried to start with looking at what are the challenges that our partners are facing in relation to cash and markets and anticipatory action, climate and the environment. The main thing I would say that came through from the Jamboard, from my perspective, was in relation to funding. So kind of having funding in place, lack of flexible funding, ensuring that funding is prioritized for these types of actions. These were all kind of repeating themes that came out during the Jamboard session. Other specific ones I'd say was in relation to this point on scalability. We had, even throughout this last few days, we've had several examples of anticipatory action projects, which often work at a kind of a smaller scale or at a localized scale, and thinking through how do we take those lessons learned, those projects, and elevate this to a scale where it's integrated into national safety net, social safety nets, or integrated with national governments, with the data systems that they're collecting. Is thinking through how can we take some of these examples and lessons learned and really elevate that. Some of our partners also noted that these thematic areas are somewhat newer to them. So these aren't areas that we've really kind of engaged with deeply. And therefore there was kind of I think a lack of understanding on how do we appropriately engage with that, but also what is the evidence in this space. And so that really will help us to kind of think through the next step, which Damien, if you can move to the next slide. So once we kind of talked about what are the challenges faced by the partners, we try to look at what are the opportunity areas, or what are the things that we specifically within the cash and markets working group space can try to work on moving forward. Yeah, specifically the opportunities. So from this discussion and looking through our Jamboard, I think there were a couple of ideas, but the main one for me at least came out around this documentation of best practices or case studies. There seemed to be a desire to want to know more about how people structured anticipatory action type of programming. What were the triggers? How do we set triggers? How do you define those triggers? How does that influence the response? And how did folks structure the funding? So once you have the triggers, and then when does the funding disperse? It seemed like there was a desire to understand a bit more about how these projects work and what are some of the lessons that we can take to other contexts. Specifically, there was also a lot of questions around the nature of the shocks, so defining the shocks, and is anticipatory action kind of appropriate across a range of different shocks. And so there was quite a bit of discussion. Sorry, I see my video is going in and out. So there's quite a bit of discussion around that piece. A couple other ones that I'll highlight for the opportunity areas was really how do we incorporate environmental costs, or the costs that we're having through the modality selection into our market assessment piece. How do we accommodate for that in the market assessment piece, but also in the minimum expenditure baskets that are set. So when we are conducting market assessments, there's some guidance that, including the NEAT tool that was presented on yesterday, I believe, that helps us to think through what are some of the environmental impacts or challenges or considerations that we need to take when designing programming. But along with that, it's not just considering it at the assessment stage, but then when we're designing things like a minimum expenditure basket, are there kind of these external environmental costs or the costs of the modalities that we select that we need to try to incorporate into those baskets, and at least being aware of that. So there was a desire to kind of improve our knowledge on that piece of it. One interesting comment that was made as well was in regards to ensuring that when we talk about anticipatory action, the triggers, the types of shocks that, while it's important to have, I'd say, kind of very quantitative evidence-based data, there's a very high need to also ensure that we integrate local knowledge into that. So local communities oftentimes have very detailed understanding of the shocks they face, where they face them, when they face them, and how that impacts their lives. And so trying to combine this local knowledge, more qualitative knowledge of shocks when it comes to anticipatory action planning with the quantitative data pieces. So from the cash and markets working group side, I'd say that kind of summarizes the discussion we had around the presentations, the challenges, then these opportunity areas. From our side, what we'll be doing is we'll be having a routine cash and markets working group meeting coming up, and really going through these lists of opportunities and seeing which ones are appropriate and feasible for us to move forward with. Over from my side.
Thank you very much, Ruko. Very interesting discussions and point. I'm sure we're going to take it back to the next cash and market working group as well. I noted down few things. We'll mention it at the end of the next presentation. And I will leave the floor to Dominique or Julia or Julie. I don't know who is going to present for the program quality discussion you had.
I think I'm going to start, Davide.
Perfect, Julie.
It's not letting me start my video, but that's okay. You all can hear me, right?
Very well.
Yes.
Thank
you. We need to put our slide up. Let's see. Christina, are you able to put our slide up from our group?
Let me try.
Julie, you can start it now. You should be able to start it.
Perfect. Okay, so while the slide is getting loaded, we did have a really good discussion around an example from the field on Madagascar about anticipatory action. We also had a great turnout at our group, and I encourage people to continue attending the working group meetings, because I think when we have good participation, we get lively conversations. And I think what we really need is the collective learning from our colleagues. We're all going through very similar challenges out in the field, and I think learning from our colleagues is a good way to go. Still waiting for our slide. Let's see. We did talk about some of the main challenges around anticipatory action, climate, and environment. Some of the key ones related to a lack of coordination around consensus and triggers, or coming to a consensus on the triggers. And then a lack of coordination mechanisms for contingency planning and forecast-based action. So essentially the theme of coordination came through very clearly as a challenge. We did also briefly touch on the challenges of short-term programming, and that really led to a deeper discussion around the need for broader thinking and linking with development activities and longer-term resilience programming. Apologies for the packed slide. I would never present this in a presentation, but there was great content and I wanted to capture it all. In terms of what the Program Quality Working Group can take on, I think we had some wonderful and actionable ideas. The first is to start a coordination group for anticipatory action. I've heard similar themes from the other working groups. I do think this is a great platform for cross-working group collaboration. We really should not be figuring this out in our own working groups. Although obviously there are nuances, I think this would be a great umbrella kind of activity for us. I mentioned earlier, considering and recognizing the need to link with development actors and longer-term resilience building. And the next one was really interesting, implementing communication channels between communities and cluster coordinators. I think this gets to the heart of the how-to of anticipatory action and how to actually make this work at a community level. I think there was a need for additional guidance on the how-to, and that's something that as a working group we can also tackle. There was also a suggestion to support country clusters in the review of anticipatory action plans, to collect studies and best practices to share. So if we have access to toolkits, best practices, and actual data on the utility of anticipatory action, we should be sharing those as a group. We can also consider how to link to scientific research and academic institutions. This was highlighted in terms of environmental solutions, but I think also related to climate. There are so many climate initiatives and activities happening right now that I think harnessing some of that interest and really linking up our programs on the ground with those broader initiatives could be quite helpful for our activities. Some of our partner colleagues highlighted that contexts are very different and we need to start thinking about anticipatory action outside of the box, right? So in locations where we don't really have government buy-in, in consideration of the issues around urbanization, which is increasing globally. There's a need for additional real examples of tools and methods. Some ideas thrown around were on contingency planning, the use and design of crisis modifiers. And then finally, this goes back to the coordination piece, considering coordination in terms of contingency planning and working with local communities to get the kinds of systems in place. What I see here is really a broad systems approach that's required, both in terms of funding, right? We have short-term emergency all the way to longer-term resilience programming. I think linking of community level with the cluster coordinators with the government and getting that buy-in system, and then linking with scientific and research communities as well. I think all of this suggests a longer term focus, even when we're looking at short-term programming. Dominic, did I miss anything that you would like to add? And thank you for your presentation on the work that your organization is doing in Madagascar.
Not really, thanks. It was really a comprehensive.
Still here with us?
Yeah, can you?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, thanks so much for this comprehensive overview. I think it was some really good inputs, especially on our board and our collection of ideas. And happy to have this discussion further, but no additional points. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Davide, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Thanks, Dominique, and thanks everyone for this discussion within the Program Quality Working Group as well. So I think that we are coming towards an end of our side event today. That was the third day of the Global Partners meeting. I have just noted down few issues that I think were commonly mentioned by all working groups on the anticipatory action issues. I think that it's clearly one of the issues that comes in. It's the funding issue. So how to ensure that funding are on place while we are talking about anticipatory action. We have seen that yesterday we had presentation from WHH and from IFRC, as well as from South Sudan colleagues on the funding, on the forecast financing. So I think we have many examples in the field. We need to understand better how and where we have challenges. And I think that this is something that more discussion are requested for that. But one of the points that came out also today is how to ensure that funding is in place when we talk about anticipatory action, since it's one of the main action, let's say, to anticipate crisis. The second one is, I think was very interesting what also Ruko has mentioned on the integration of anticipatory action within the national social safety net, how to ensure that when we are able to elevate to a scale where we can integrate it and to the national safety net where we are working on. This is another, I think, food for thought for all working groups. And another one, I think, is the complementarity issue, or let's put in that way, what we do as cluster. As you know, it's collecting information. Without information, the cluster is not working. And what it means for us in terms of anticipatory action, I think was mentioned by more than one, that we need to know also what is already ongoing in order to better plan. So it's important that we have information always on the on what is going to happen when a crisis will happen. And on this, the cluster can play a great role. I think that also we had a colleague from Ethiopia, from agriculture cluster, that was giving the example of having information about the organization able to respond in case of a drought, and many other examples can mention here. But I think that the cluster and partners have a quite good space and scope to work and to improve the work on that, because starting from the information that we know what we need to do for anticipate action towards the crisis. And another point that I would highlight is around consensus. I think it's very important as well when we are working all together collectively to reach a consensus, in this case around the triggers, when we should act, for example, when we should intervene, and when we have the connection with the early warning systems, and what are the indicators that will trigger the response. And we say, as a cluster, as food security actors, we go ahead. So I think those are a few of the points that I noted down. I think that it's very important for all of our colleagues that are here for the first time participating to the working group, that we thank you all, and please join us. It has been already said, but please join us to the working group. Each working group has a TOR that you can find online in our website. And if you want to join our working group, you can write to myself or to our colleague Damien Jude. We can put our mail here on the chat box. So if you want to join any one of the working group, please do so, because in the coming months also we're going to work and to focus on few issues, including the next work plan on which anticipatory action issues and environment will be also integrated too. We're going to work on the new strategy, and we want your input. And we are, as I believe Ruko was mentioning also on the chat, we are going to, one of the recommendation from the SAG was also how to integrate better the work of the different working groups together, having a common work planning, a collaborative attitude, and coordinate within each other within the three groups. And you know that in any circumstances, you can also ask the SAG and the global coordinators to open new group in case a technical working group is needed. And this is, for example, the case of what happened during COVID, where we had a working group that was opened. And then we can request the SAG to approve it, and in case a new working group can be open, if it is the case. So I think I'll stop here. I hope I've mentioned everything I noted down. And I thank you, Paul, again for the excellent facilitation, and all the working group facilitators that have been doing a great job. So thanks all for the working group chair and co-chair, so Ludo and Jan for the agriculture, and for the program today we have Julie, but we had also Dominique and Julia, who are new enters and newcomers. So thanks a lot for that. And for the cash and market, we had Ruko, thanks a lot, and Corey, thank you very much. So I think that for quick closure, I can ask Abdul Majid of Nawar if you want to come in and say a couple of words to end the meeting. Over from my side.
Okay, maybe I can come in quickly, because I think we are not going to repeat. I think it was very rich 3 days, very interesting discussions, and a lot of, I think today, actually, I think it also more concrete discussion on how this can fit within the broader work. So thank you, all of you, for the continuous engagement, for the participation, the active participation. And thank you, Davide, for organizing and for bringing all of us together within these 3 days. Thank you. I know that Paul has left, but I would like to thank him again for the facilitation, and thank you, the working group chairs, for also facilitating and really keeping also the discussion, I think, on purpose and focused on how it contributes to the work. So thank you all, and yeah, we'll be in touch, I think, on the various opportunities, and one of them are the working group, of course, the SAG meeting, the working group, and the rest of the discussion. Thank you all.
Thanks, Nawar. Thanks, Davide, for very good facilitation. I think I had very detailed comments yesterday, so I will not repeat anything. Just for the people who are new today and had detailed discussions, I was participating in cash and market working group, and I have seen that they have taken a very strategic approach to come up with a few things that can really help them to draft their plan for 2022 and onward. And I think there is already a realization among the group members as well, and in the group leads as well, that we need to work with the different groups to see how we are complementing to each other work. So I just would like to say that please keep it in your mind that we are at the end of the year. Try to reflect a little bit that what has been achieved last year and what can be our potential work plan for 2022, and how we can work together with other groups. There was one suggestion that we have a quarterly meeting among the groups where SEG is also available, or maybe among those group members, and then providing an update to SEG so that they can provide the advice on the way forward. That is very well taken. But if there is any other thing that the group leads or partners want to suggest for 2022 as a priority, we would love to have that. I think this was a different approach where, a very detailed feedback was sought from partners before the meeting. So thanks, Davide and Naur, for that. The prioritization of the topics were also done by the partners, and the meeting was almost led by the partners. And that's what I think our way forward should be. So with that, I think the only thing that I expect very soon in the coming quarter, which will be the first quarter of 2022, that we have at least an idea that what we want to really achieve during 2022 and how we can work together, not only within our cluster, but with other clusters as well, and try to see that how actually we can produce something which is helpful at the country level for our frontline soldiers who are actually coordinating the response and providing the response to affected communities across the globe. So with that, thank you very much for all your support. Over from my side. Davide, do we still have you?
Yes, I think we can close the meeting, Walter. Yeah. And thank you again all, and see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Nice to see you all.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.